Melissa Sue Anderson has carried a secret for decades. To millions, she was Mary Ingalls, steady, graceful, the dependable heart of Little House on the Prairie. But behind the prairie dresses and wholesome lessons, she witnessed something very different. Michael Landon, the show's towering figure. Karen Grassle, the woman who dared to challenge him. And a silence that lasted more than 40 years. For Anderson, the cost was personal. As a child, she was handed the heaviest storylines: blindness, grief, and loss, while she watched the adults around her clash in ways the cameras never showed. It shaped her career, it changed her childhood, and it left her carrying truths she never spoke aloud, until now. So what really happened between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle? What did Melissa Sue Anderson see that kept her silent for so long? And why, after all these years, has she finally decided to break that silence? Melissa Sue Anderson's journey onto Little House on the Prairie didn't begin with red carpets or fame. It began with a ballet class. Her teacher noticed her striking blue eyes and subtle presence and told her mother, "She belongs on camera." That single observation led to commercials, guest spots on Bewitched and the Brady Bunch, and eventually an audition that would change her life. At just 11 years old, Anderson walked into a room and landed the role of Mary Ingalls, the eldest daughter of the frontier family who would soon capture America's heart. From the first day on set, she was different from the other children. Melissa Gilbert, who played Laura, bubbled with energy and openness. Allison Arngrim, who played Nellie, thrived on mischief. Anderson, by contrast, was reserved, tightly composed, and deeply serious about her craft. Cast and crew saw her not as a child who happened to act, but as an actress who happened to be a child. That seriousness gave her character a unique weight. Mary wasn't just a sibling in braids. She was dependable, gentle, almost unshakable, qualities that Anderson carried naturally. At first, the atmosphere on set matched the wholesome stories the cameras captured. Michael Landon, playing Charles Ingalls while also writing and producing, set the tone. To many, he was both father and captain, creating a family spirit that bound cast and crew together. Karen Grassle, as Caroline Ingalls, quickly established herself as the matriarch on screen and the steadying presence behind the scenes. Together they made the Ingalls family believable, not just to the audience but to the children growing up in its shadow. But the harmony was never complete. Even in the early years, cracks formed, subtle but real. Grassle began to sense inequalities. While Landon received enormous credit as the creative force, she was the one expected to embody maternal warmth with little recognition beyond her paycheck. For Anderson, still a child, those adult tensions were not fully understood, but she felt them. She noticed when conversations turned sharp, when smiles faded between takes, when the air around Landon and Grassle carried weight she couldn't name. Her own path was different. Landon saw something in her, a depth, a quiet intensity, and began writing storylines that tested her. Unlike the light-hearted sibling rivalries or prairie mischief given to others, Anderson's Mary shouldered tragedy. This wasn't by chance. Landon trusted her to carry emotion that most child actors couldn't. She didn't always know why the scripts leaned darker for her, but she never argued. She simply delivered. That early seriousness became both a gift and a burden. While audiences admired Mary's strength, Anderson herself was already learning that acting could demand more than joy. The episode The Lord is My Shepherd in 1974 made that painfully clear. Though Laura was the central figure in the story, Anderson absorbed the atmosphere of grief and guilt on set. The death of a baby brother may have been scripted, but the mourning around her felt chillingly real. At 12 years old, she realized that fiction could pierce as deeply as fact. Even then, she didn't speak. She didn't share the toll it took or the unease she carried afterward. Silence became her protection. Silence, and an ability to retreat inward while the cameras rolled. That same silence would follow her in the years ahead, as tensions between Landon and Grassle became more visible, and as Mary Ingalls herself descended into some of the show's darkest arcs. Anderson's childhood was no longer ordinary. It was shaped by long shooting days, whispers between adults, and scripts that demanded grief far beyond her age. Yet she kept her composure, refusing to reveal what she felt inside. The audience saw a strong Mary Ingalls. Behind the scenes, Melissa Sue Anderson was quietly absorbing lessons that would define how she viewed Landon. how she regarded Grassle, and ultimately why she kept her silence for so long. Michael Landon was more than a leading man. On Little House on the Prairie, he was the architect, the writer, the producer, and the anchor that everyone else orbited around. To audiences, he was Charles Ingalls, the ideal frontier father, a man of integrity who guided his family through every hardship. On set, his presence was even larger. He wrote scripts late into the night, directed episodes himself, and controlled the rhythm of the production with relentless drive. For the children, especially Melissa Sue Anderson, he was both a mentor and a measure of pressure no one else could match. Anderson has often spoken of his guidance. He treated her as an actress rather than a child, expecting her to deliver emotion with the same precision as adults around her. In many ways, she thrived under that attention. Landon's belief in her talent was part of why she was given the storylines that would define Mary Ingalls. But there was another side to that trust. His expectations were heavy. He demanded composure, control, and maturity from a girl still in middle school. To disappoint him felt unthinkable. Karen Grassle, meanwhile, saw a different side. As Caroline Ingalls, she was essential to the show's image of family stability. Yet she began to realize that Landon's control extended beyond scripts. He decided which stories were told, who received attention, and, crucially, who was paid what. Grassle would later reveal that her salary was far below what Landon earned, and even below what she believed she deserved as the leading actress. To her, the imbalance was not just financial, it was symbolic of a deeper disregard. Melissa Sue was caught in the middle. Too young to fully understand negotiations or contracts, she nonetheless sensed the shift in atmosphere when Grassle pushed back. The warmth that surrounded Landon's leadership could turn cold when challenged. He was generous, but he was also proud, and those who resisted him risked finding themselves sidelined. For a teenager like Anderson, who relied on his approval for both her role and her confidence, the safest path was silence. She observed but never intervened. She carried her thoughts privately, even as she watched the tension ripple through her television family. Landon's drive came at a cost for everyone. He demanded long days and emotional intensity from his actors. He encouraged the children to act with authenticity, often pushing them into scenes that blurred the line between fiction and real feeling. Melissa Sue, chosen for her composure, became his instrument for some of the show's darkest arcs. She rarely objected, but the weight was real. Each tragedy her character endured, blindness, loss, grief, reflected Landon's vision of a drama that would resonate with audiences through pain, as much as through hope. For Grassle, those same decisions often felt like erasure. While Anderson was asked to carry enormous emotional burdens, Grassle saw her own storylines shrink. She felt reduced to supportive gestures, her character serving others' arcs rather than being fully explored. What Landon saw as creative direction, Grassle saw as imbalance. The clash between them was inevitable, and it unfolded slowly, quietly, but unmistakably. Anderson, still young, absorbed the dynamics like a silent witness. Landon's intensity inspired her and frightened her. Grassle's strength impressed her but also taught her the risks of speaking out. She learned early that silence was safer for a child's career, safer for a girl trying to hold her ground in the shadow of powerful adults. Yet silence doesn't erase memory. Anderson remembers the pressure. She remembers the days when Landon's drive electrified the set, and the moments when his control left others bitter. She remembers how Grassle's determination carved out cracks in the illusion of perfect harmony. And she remembers how, through it all, she carried scripts that demanded she suffer on camera while the adults waged quieter battles off it. Michael Landon gave Melissa Sue Anderson opportunities few child actors ever receive. But he also set in motion the silence she would hold for decades. His leadership shaped her career, and his conflicts with Karen Grassle shaped her understanding of what it cost to survive on Little House. To the world, Karen Grassle was Ma, the steadfast mother who gave Little House on the Prairie its moral anchor. On screen, she was nurturing, patient, and unwavering. Off-screen, she was something else entirely, a woman navigating a business that too often underestimated her. While Michael Landon controlled the scripts and Melissa Sue Anderson carried the heaviest tragedies, Grassle began fighting battles that most fans never saw. Grassle had trained in theater, not television. She carried a seriousness into the role that matched Anderson's own. But as the seasons progressed, she noticed a troubling pattern. The show's storylines centered on Charles, Mary, and Laura, while Caroline Ingalls faded into the background. The matriarch who held the family together on screen was increasingly reduced to reactions, supportive smiles, and quiet comfort. For Grassle, this wasn't just a creative choice. It was a reflection of how she, as a woman in the industry, was being sidelined. What made it harder was the paycheck. Landon was the undisputed star, and as producer earned many times more than Grassle. When she discovered the disparity, she confronted him. The result wasn't fiery explosions, but cold distance. Grassle later described how their relationship shifted, how a layer of warmth was lost. She stood her ground, but the price was tension that never fully healed. Melissa Sue Anderson, still young, didn't hear the negotiations or read the contracts, but she felt the silence. She noticed when Landon and Grassle's conversations grew clipped, when laughter faded, when the air between takes became charged with something unspoken. As a child, she couldn't name it, but she absorbed it, and she kept absorbing it long after the cameras rolled. Fans assumed that the Little House cast was a perfect family, and in many ways it was. There was genuine affection, camaraderie, and shared purpose. But Anderson and Grassle both learned that perfection was a performance. Behind the warm glow of the Prairie, Grassle was quietly fighting for respect in an industry that expected her to accept less. For Anderson, watching from the sidelines, that fight left an impression. The contrast between the two women was striking. Grassle was outspoken when pushed too far. She was willing to take the risk of confronting Landon, even if it meant tension. Anderson, by contrast, learned to protect herself by retreating inward. She didn't rebel. She didn't argue. She delivered what was asked of her and survived by silence. Yet both women carried burdens that shaped them. Grassle with her professional struggles, Anderson with her emotional ones. Anderson later acknowledged that Grassle's presence mattered. She saw how Grassle tried to stand up for herself, how she resisted being reduced to a supporting role. In some ways, Grassle gave her a model of strength, a reminder that silence wasn't the only path. But as a child caught between admiration for Landon and sympathy for Grassle, Anderson knew she wasn't in a position to choose sides. Her survival depended on staying neutral, even as she watched the strain deepen. The irony was that the audience never saw this. To fans, Caroline Ingalls was perfect. She was patient, loving, and endlessly supportive. But the woman playing her was negotiating, struggling, and often frustrated with the lack of recognition she received. Anderson, in her silence, became one of the few who saw both sides, the strength Grassle showed in public and the disappointment she carried in private. For years, Anderson never spoke about it. She didn't weigh in on Grassle's later revelations about pay disputes or creative conflicts. She didn't contradict her, nor did she defend Landon. She held her silence, letting others debate what really happened. But inside, she carried the memories of a set where warmth was real, yet never absolute, where Karen Grassle's quiet battles reminded her that even the strongest mothers, on screen or off, sometimes had to fight just to be seen. And that battle, though unspoken at the time, would shape the way Anderson eventually broke her silence, not just about herself, but about what she witnessed between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle. By the mid-70s, Little House on the Prairie was no longer just a gentle family drama. It was becoming something heavier, darker, and far more demanding for the actors who carried its weight. And no one carried more than Melissa Sue Anderson. Michael Landon recognized her ability to hold emotion without breaking. While other children were given mischievous storylines or schoolyard rivalries, Anderson was handed devastation. The moment Mary Ingalls went blind in season 4, the tone shifted permanently. Suddenly, a character once defined by strength and quiet poise became the face of loss, suffering, and relentless struggle. For a young teenager, the responsibility was staggering. Going blind wasn't played for drama alone. Landon insisted it be real, believable, and heartbreaking. Anderson spent hours studying how to portray blindness convincingly, practicing gestures, movements, and the stillness of eyes that no longer saw. The result was extraordinary. Viewers felt Mary's world collapse, but behind the performance was a child pushing herself to embody grief she could barely comprehend. And it didn't stop there. In Season 6, the pain intensified when Mary and her husband Adam lost their newborn baby in a fire. It was one of the most devastating episodes the series ever produced, flames consuming not just a home, but the promise of family. Anderson later admitted the toll was crushing. She once remarked that whenever the writers ran out of ideas, someone would say, "What can we do to Melissa Sue that's really awful?" It was half a joke, half a confession. Karen Grassle's experience during these years was strikingly different. While Anderson carried scripts filled with tragedy, Grassle's role often shrank. She comforted, she supported, she delivered warmth in the margins, yet behind the scenes she was still clashing with Landon over fairness and respect. The contrast was stark. One actress overwhelmed by emotional burden, another frustrated by creative neglect. Both were shaped by Landon's choices, both were bruised in different ways, and Anderson was the one who saw it unfold from the middle. For the young actress, the set became a place where fiction and reality blurred dangerously. Filming scenes of blindness, loss, and grief left emotions that lingered long after the cameras stopped. Child actors aren't equipped with the tools adults use to separate performance from life. Anderson had no therapist, no structured support. She absorbed the sorrow, and she carried it home. The irony was brutal. While the show promoted values of faith, family, and resilience, Anderson herself was learning resilience the hard way. She learned how to cry on cue, how to bury her feelings behind professionalism, and how to remain composed while others cracked under pressure. That same composure which made her Mary Ingalls also made her silent. Anderson's silence wasn't weakness, it was survival. She saw what happened when Karen Grassle spoke up. The tension, the distance, the unspoken chill. She saw how Landon's control could shape not just storylines but relationships, and so she chose another path: to endure, to deliver, and to withhold, to play Mary with heartbreaking conviction while never fully sharing her own. But silence has its limits. Each tragic episode added another weight. Each demand from Landon reinforced the power he held. Each quiet conflict with Grassle reminded her that even adults weren't safe from his control. For Anderson, the message was clear. In Landon's world, you either bore the burden in silence or you risked the fallout. The tragedies written into Mary Ingalls' life became the story of Melissa Sue Anderson's career. And as she grew older, she began to realize that carrying that burden alone was unsustainable. Something had to give. And eventually it did. For decades, Melissa Sue Anderson kept her memories locked away. While former co-stars wrote memoirs, gave interviews, and revisited the Prairie for reunions, she chose a quieter path. She didn't deny the past, but she didn't indulge it either. Fans often mistook her silence for distance, or even disdain. In truth, it was self-protection. The grief she carried through Mary Ingalls' tragedies, the tension she witnessed between Michael Landon and Karen Grassle, none of it was easy to revisit. But eventually, Anderson did open up, and when she did, it was with honesty that surprised everyone. Her reflections on Landon were complex. She acknowledged his brilliance, his ability to see talent in her when she was just a child, and the opportunities he gave her. Without him, she may never have carried the storylines that defined her career. But she also admitted the weight of those choices. Landon, for all his warmth and vision, could be controlling, demanding, and unrelenting. His power was intoxicating and intimidating. Anderson revealed that the silence she kept around him wasn't accidental. It was necessary to survive in his orbit, to protect herself while delivering what he demanded. Her thoughts on Karen Grassle carried the same mix of admiration and recognition. She praised Grassle's strength, her ability to confront issues that others ignored, and her determination to be treated fairly. Anderson admitted she saw how difficult it was for Grassle to push back against Landon's authority, how cold the air became when she refused to accept less than she deserved. She didn't criticize Grassle for speaking out. On the contrary, she understood it and admired it. But as a child actor, she couldn't take that risk herself. So she stayed silent, watching one woman fight for her place while another man controlled the board. Breaking her silence wasn't about revenge or bitterness. It was about honesty. Anderson finally admitted what the silence had cost her: the ability to separate herself from Mary Ingalls' endless tragedies. By never addressing it, she had carried it longer than she should have. Speaking about Landon and Grassle was a way to place the weight where it belonged, not only on her shoulders, but on the system that demanded too much of her and gave too little to others. She also revealed why she left Little House after season 7. It wasn't just about pursuing new roles or growing beyond Mary. It was about preservation. The relentless suffering written for her character had become unbearable, and watching the strain between Landon and Grassle only confirmed what she already knew: the Prairie wasn't as peaceful as it looked. Her departure was an act of survival, a choice to protect her own peace in an industry that rarely allowed child stars that luxury. Even in breaking her silence, Anderson never turned cruel. She didn't tarnish Landon's memory or diminish Grassle's battles. Instead, she humanized them both. Landon as brilliant but flawed, Grassle as courageous but wounded, and herself, not as the untouchable Mary Ingalls, but as a young girl who bore too much, too soon, and chose silence until she was strong enough to speak. Her reflections added something no other voice could. Landon and Grassle both told their stories in time. Anderson's was the missing piece, the quiet witness who finally explained why the Prairie's sunshine often cast shadows we never saw. And by finally breaking her silence, Melissa Sue Anderson gave fans not scandal, not bitterness, but truth. A truth about childhood, about power, about resilience. A truth that reframes the way we remember Little House on the Prairie. Melissa Sue Anderson will always be remembered as Mary Ingalls, the quiet strength of Little House on the Prairie. For decades, she chose silence over spectacle, dignity over drama. But when she finally spoke, she revealed a truth fans had long suspected: that the Prairie was never as simple as it seemed. For more emotional stories, check out this video.